inquiry, but his future will be decided behind me in Parliament today.
And of course, it is the showdown today. The Prime Minister will this morning give his account of how the government handled the pandemic. Our reporter, Ray Addison, is outside the inquiry.
As he arrived at the COVID inquiry this morning, protesters accused the Prime Minister of causing needless deaths by prioritising the economy over public health. Now he faces a full day of tough questions as he tries to explain why he didn't deserve the nickname Dr. Death.
Farage finishes third. As Nigel Farage leaves the jungle, some Conservative MPs want Boris Johnson to return as Prime Minister and unite with Nigel Farage to save the Tory party. Would they get your vote? Farage gave his damning assessment on the Tories this morning.
Rudderless, leaderless, utterly useless, headed for catastrophe at the next election, deservedly so. But somehow to think that I'm going to walk out of a jungle after 23 nights and announce a relaunch in British politics, frankly, is for the birds.
Tells it as it is, doesn't he? Transphobic tweet. The Conservative Party's Deputy Chairwoman, Rachel McLean, is in hot water for sharing a tweet calling a transgender woman a man who wears a wig and calls himself a proud lesbian. This is the Green Party candidate for Bromsgrove, Melissa Poulton's response.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it is a transphobic comment. It's dog whistling at the finest, you know. It's gaslighting, it's everything. By attacking a minority group, it's just, yeah, you know, it's a shame.
Let us know your thoughts on all that and much more that we'll be talking about. You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.com. Let us know your name and where you're watching and listening from. First of all, let's get all your latest headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thanks very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. Here are the headlines at 9:32. Rishi Sunak is facing one of his toughest weeks as Prime Minister as he appears at the COVID inquiry, while MPs consider his government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda. Mr Sunak is expected to face questions over whether his Eat Out to Help Out scheme may have fuelled the spread of the virus. It's understood he'll also be asked about the degree of consideration that was given to the potential impact of lockdowns. The Prime Minister's appearance at the inquiry comes after previous evidence showed top scientists referring to him as Dr. Death, the Chancellor, during the pandemic. Meanwhile, GB News understands 4 groups of Tory backbenchers will give their verdict on the government's Rwanda scheme at around lunchtime today. That's as the flagship bill is due to face a crunch vote tomorrow. Gary Lineker is among a number of high-profile people who've signed a letter branding the government scheme uncaring, chaotic and costly. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the sports presenter should stick to football.
What is moral about allowing criminal gangs to put people's lives at risk for large sums of money by trafficking them across the English Channel? What on earth has got into anyone's minds to think that we shouldn't challenge or tackle that disgusting trade in human misery? And so, you know, again, unless he, Labour or anyone else have got a better plan, at least we're putting plans in place which are starting to have success, slashed by a third, and would do more in the future.
The United Nations is experiencing one of its worst funding shortfalls in years after around a third of its required aid budget was provided last year. Humanitarian crises were estimated to cost around $57 billion over the last 12 months as conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine worsened. However, after receiving just a fraction of that amount, the UN is lowering its expectation for the year ahead, with today's appeal for $46 billion. Aid Chief says it's difficult to decrease aid budgets amid intensifying global conflicts, while staying realistic about what's needed. Those are the top stories, and you can, of course, get more on all of those. Just visit our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Andrew and Pip.
Well, actors, TV personalities, all campaigners are all calling for the Rwanda policy to be scrapped.
They include Succession star Brian Cox, TV chef Big Zoo and the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt.
One signatories again brought the BBC's impartiality into question. Well, he's smashed the BBC's impartiality issue. It is the overpaid sports presenter Gary Lineker.
When signing the letter, the BBC star said, "We need a new system that reflects the will of the British people who have opened their homes, donated and volunteered in their local communities. That is why I'm backing this new campaign, because fair really can begin here."
Well, it's upset many Tory MPs who are calling for the BBC Director General Tim Davie to intervene.
In response, the BBC said, "Like all freelance presenters, Gary is free to contribute to projects for third parties as long as these do not conflict with his BBC commitments, do not breach guidelines on conflicts of interest, nor bring the BBC into disrepute." And he does so regularly.
And of course, this isn't the first time this year Gary Lineker has put his foot in it on social media. Back in March, responding to Suella Braverman's Stop the Boats policy, he tweeted,
"There is no huge influx. We take far fewer refugees than other major European countries. This is just an immeasurably cruel policy directed at the most vulnerable people in language that is not dissimilar to that used by Germany in the 30s. And I'm out of order."
Yes, he is. He was out of order then, and he's out of order now. And if you remember, Pip, he was suspended from presenting what's it called, Match of the Day, for one match. And all these other BBC presenters withdrew their services. They should all have been fired.
BBC revised their guidelines, didn't they, back in the spring because of all this. But is this not a case of the BBC needs Gary Lineker more than Gary Lineker needs the BBC?
Well, I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, he's a football pundit. Anyone can do it, can't they? And they pay him £1.6 million of licence payment.
Come on, not anyone can do it. He brings a wealth of experience to that job.
There are hundreds of former footballers who could do the job just as well. And they wouldn't charge anything like as much money. He's taking the mick.
But you know as well as I do, it comes down to ratings. He rates very well, and therefore I think the BBC gives him more breadth to go places. I mean, look at Carol Vorderman. Why was Carol Vorderman not allowed to speak her mind?
Well, she was sacked. BBC Radio Wales. Who knew
was
she
she
even had a
sacked,
show
or was
there?
it by mutual consent?
She was shown the door.
Right. So. There's a big disparity there.
Yeah, there is.
And because Carol Vorderman is not one of their biggest paid stars,
exactly.
Carol Vorderman does not rate in the same way that Gary Lineker rates.
The BBC should... I've never thought the BBC should be driven by ratings, but, I mean, he'll get away with it because he got away with it last time. Let's bring into the conversation... Oh, actually, we've got Chris Hope. We've got Chris Hope in Westminster.
On this crucial vote tomorrow on the Rwanda policy, it is quite a week for Rishi Sunak because he's facing criticism from both sides of his party and a stark warning from his former immigration minister, Robert Jenrick, this weekend, that the bill will not work.
So, is Rishi on the ropes? Chris, tell us, what do you think? Chris Hope, who's with us in our Westminster studio, he is on the ropes. This is going to be probably the biggest test of his premiership, the vote tomorrow, even though it's on a second reading when you don't normally expect governments to be defeated.
That's right. If he loses tomorrow's second reading vote on the Rwanda bill, Andrew and Pip, it'll be the first time in nearly 30 years it's happened. So that looks unlikely. More likely is that the MPs on the right and left are meeting today to look at this Rwanda bill. Can it work? Can it make these planes take off with migrants on in May next year, as the PM has told us he wants to happen? Will it happen, and can it do that without really annoying the left by going too far away from the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights, or the right by not going far enough to ignore the ECHR? And down the middle travels the Prime Minister. It's absolutely vital, and whether it happens or not will remain to be seen. We'll know by around midday, lunchtime, what the right think. The ERG, the European Research Group of Tory MPs, the Northern Research Group, the Common Sense Group, the New Conservatives, Conservative Future, all these groups are meeting in a mass meeting. I heard you chuckling there, Andrew, but it's a lot of ginger groups on the right are meeting to work out what to say. We'll find out about 2 o'clock, bringing that news on GB News. Then later, the left, the One Nation group meet, about 100 MPs on either side, with the remainder in the middle. Only 28 MPs need to vote against this on the Tory side for it to fall. If it falls, then all bets are off. You might expect Labour to try and submit a vote of no confidence in the government on Wednesday. It could lead to letters of no confidence in the PM's leadership from his own MPs. It really is very, very tense, and the PM, of course, is in the wrong place today. He wants to be in Westminster. He wants to be in his room, his office, behind the Speaker's chair, meeting MPs offering them support, guidance, arm twisting, baubles, knighthoods, damehoods, whatever you can do to make sure the numbers are big for majority tomorrow. Instead, he's stuck in Paddington discussing what he did when he was Chancellor during the COVID pandemic. It's not ideal for him.
All right, that's Chris Hope, who is our political editor in Westminster. Well, we are delighted to say with us in the studio is Marc Francois, who is, of course, part of the European Research Group. The Star Chamber of the European Research Group is deliberating. What's going to happen today, Mark?
Right, if I can explain for a few viewers. Because we're talking about very complex areas of law and concepts of refoulement, what we have at our disposal, we're very fortunate, is a group of absolutely expert lawyers, chaired by Sibylle Cash, who's a respected constitutional lawyer in his own right, Martin Howard KC, Barnabas Reynolds and David Jones MP. They have spent the last week or so going through the bill in forensic detail, and the meeting that Chris referred to, which will be at noon today in Portcullis House, and a meeting of these 5 different groups, what you might call the 5 tribes of the centre and the right of the parliamentary party. Sibylle will address that meeting and deliver, if you like, the verdict of the Star Chamber on whether or not the bill will work. I've seen the report, and you and your viewers might like to know. That meeting is at noon because we felt that the MP should hear it from Sibylle first. I hope the media will respect that. But around 1 o'clock-ish, depending on how long the meeting lasts, we will then publish the report of the Star Chamber. It's about 10 pages, online, so that all the media can read it, and even more importantly, all the people of the United Kingdom can read it for themselves if they so wish.
And if it says, Mark, it is unworkable, the bill in its current form, can you still support the bill tomorrow in the vote, knowing that you've got opportunities to amend it and perhaps mould it in the way you feel it should operate?
Andrew, let's see how the discussion goes. It could well be that there will be, as the phrase says, further such meetings later today. I think the Common Sense Group are meeting early this evening. We might well all go over to their place, as it were. So there will be a discussion all day and probably into tomorrow morning about how to vote. I've learned from past experience never to predict that way in advance. I think we need to hear from the horse's mouth, if you'll forgive the expression, what Sibylle and his team of legal experts have concluded. That obviously will inform the debate. But if the bill is deficient in certain aspects, if it won't do what it says on the tin, Sibylle and his team will explain why that is.
You talked there about 5 separate groups discussing this bill, 5 different factions within the Tory party. Isn't this the overwhelming problem here, that the Tory party is careering towards defeat at the next election because you are all so completely fractured?
Well, we need to get this right. The Prime Minister faithfully promised the British people he would stop the boats. Now, in fairness...
Should he have ever said that?
Well, some people may have advised him and his team not to be quite so emphatic.
I think they did advise him that.
Anyway, they were. Stop the boats is a binary statement. It doesn't say reduce the flow or hold them up a bit. It says stop. We have, in fairness, reduced the flow. The Prime Minister was involved in negotiations with his Albanian counterpart, and many of the Albanians are now being returned very fast. The reason you don't see it on the television is because the Albanians didn't want that. So there is a reduction, but it's not stop. The key question is, will this bill, if it comes into law, actually stop the boats? Will it provide sufficient legal power to immediately deport to Rwanda anyone who comes across the channel illegally on a boat? And at noon today, Sibylle Cash will answer that question. Or
is it the case that what could happen is that a very small number of people will go to Rwanda before the next election and the Prime Minister can go, yay, this is working? And the only focus is on the election, not whether actually this plan works long term.
Well, a few people probably wouldn't cut it. The point of the Rwanda scheme is to be a deterrent. I mean, what's going on here? You have utterly amoral people traffickers charging people up to €10,000, so we're told, to undertake a perilous journey across the busiest shipping lane in the world. And deeply unfortunately, some of those people have drowned mid-channel. The people traffickers don't care. They just want the money. The only way that will stop is when people can see self-evidently that even if you get across the channel, even if you pay the €10,000 and you get to Britain, you will rapidly go to Rwanda. You won't be able to string it out with endless legal appeals and court cases and clever legal arguments. You'll be on a plane very swiftly to Rwanda. At that point, the boats should stop because people will stop paying the money. So, to answer your question, sorry, just sending a few won't cut it. You're going to have to send quite a lot. So the word gets round.
Even if their boats are stopped, Mark, and that's a big if, isn't it? What about the numbers of people pouring into this country legally? Look, what was it, 700,000? But 1.2 million came in. And then, but a lot of people left, probably young, bright people from Britain going elsewhere. I mean, these numbers are unsustainable legally.
They are unsustainable. That's why, to be fair, the government announced last week a whole package of measures to cut those numbers quite dramatically. Things like restricting the ability of students to bring dependents with them when they come to study in Britain. From the briefing I saw, the sum total of those measures should reduce that total by approximately, round numbers, 300,000 within a year or so. You've got to remember part of that number, and you're right, it's a net figure, Andrew. Part of that number are Ukrainians coming over because of the war. I think most of my constituents wouldn't begrudge them that. You've then got, for instance, Afghan interpreters who help British forces. I don't think my constituents would begrudge them that. What I think really enrages them more than anything are people who are primarily, in most cases, coming in illegally across the channel as economic migrants.
But it's a fraction of the problem. I know we want to deter them, but it's a fraction of the problem. Should the government's focus be on getting this 745,000 figure down, not on...
Well, I think, to be honest, we've got to address both. Now, we've had two previous pieces of legislation on this. We had the Nationalities and Borders Act 2021, which was meant, at least in part, to address the boats problem. That didn't work. We had the Illegal Immigration Act 2023, same thing. That hasn't worked. So this is kind of the risk is that the electorate will say 3 strikes and you're out. And I was out canvassing the other Saturday morning in my constituency in the freezing cold, and my constituents made it pretty plain to me. They expect legislators to sort this. I mean, one summed it up very well. He said, look, I don't understand all this legalese. I elect people like you to sort that out. Do whatever you've got to do to stop these boats coming. You're an MP, sort it out. Now, in France last week, according to Le Monde, the French deported an Uzbek alleged terrorist who's been a big issue for them for years. Irrespective of the ECHR, they just did it. The French cabinet is not as obsessed with the ECHR as half our cabinet.
Quite.
That is part of the problem. But I think the British people want these boats stopped and they want their legislators to do whatever is necessary. So Bill Cash will tell us this afternoon whether or not that bill is fit for purpose.
All right, you're going to stay with us, Mark, because now if the Prime Minister didn't have enough on his plate this week, he's at the COVID inquiry all day today.
Yeah, he's giving his evidence in about 10 minutes' time. So let's speak to GB News reporter Ray Addison, who is outside the inquiry. Good morning, Ray. I believe Rishi Sunak has already arrived. And was there a little bit of heckling going on?
Yeah, absolutely there was, from protesters here, bereaved families chanting and jeering towards the Prime Minister and accusing him of putting public finances ahead of public health. Of course, he faces hours of tough questions here at this all-day session at the inquiry. And of course, most of the concerns stem from Mr. Sunak's signature policy, if you will, the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. That was introduced in the summer of 2020 after the first lockdown. And although it was understandably initially very popular, there are now concerns, serious concerns, that it fueled a spike in the number of infections and subsequently deaths. Of course, one scientific study found that areas with a higher take-up of that scheme saw an increase in people testing positive for COVID, although has to be said there is still much debate about the science surrounding that study. Now, Rishi Sunak says that he had previously written to the inquiry saying that senior government scientists were consulted before that scheme was introduced. They have denied that, so that'll be one key point they'll want to get to the bottom of today. We know that at the time, Chief Medical Officer Sir Chris Whitty had branded the policy Eat Out to Help Out the Virus. Angela McLean, who's now the UK's Chief Scientific Advisor, also branded Rishi Sunak as Dr. Death at the time as well. Of course, Rishi Sunak will be fighting back. He'll be fighting his corner during this day of evidence. He'll be saying that scientists, including independent advisors from SAGE, were given too much sway over policy decisions during the pandemic. He's going to try and paint himself as a lone voice, somebody who was often made to feel, in his words, incredibly uncomfortable at meetings. He's described in the past how many of his concerns that he raised were met with silence, and he was effectively banned from discussing the trade-off. So a full day of evidence here from Rishi Sunak.
All right, that's Ray Addison. Thanks for that, Ray. And we've still got Mark Francois with us. Can I ask you, Mark, if you have a view on Gary Lineker sticking his nose in the Rwanda policy again, saying it's wrong, it should be dropped? We were here earlier when he was likening the immigration policy of his government to Nazi Germany in the 30s.
I think that last remark from Gary is deeply offensive. My father was a D-Day veteran, and I find that remark deeply offensive. We discussed this before, Andrew. I think the problem with the BBC is it may say on Tim Davis' business card that he's the Director General of the organisation, but he's not in charge. His writ doesn't run within his own organisation. He's got a kind of middle management that are out of control. So, you know, they pay lip service to objectivity and then they say what the heck they like. So, I mean, let's be really honest. Tim Davie has lost control of the British Broadcasting Corporation and he's being effectively blackmailed by some of his senior talent, as they say, and there's no point pretending otherwise.
The thing is, Gary Lineker, he is a freelance presenter. He doesn't talk... Well, no, there is a difference. If you're freelance and if you're staff, there is a marked difference.
And you appear on Match of the Day...
And he doesn't talk about it on Match of the Day. I'm just putting the other side to you here, Mark.
Yeah, I understand that, but look... Tim Davie had a face-off with Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker won.
Hands down.
And everyone in the country can see it. Now, does the BBC seriously try to pretend in the 21st century that it is a politically objective organisation? If it really believes that, it has to stop this. If it can't or won't stop it, OK, but then stop pretending that you're objective and stop charging people £160 a year for a poll tax for a television channel that many young people no longer even watch.
Mark, you tell it as it is, and you've told it brilliantly on time too. Now, still to come, we're going to find out, we're going to be talking a bit more about Nigel Farage, I think, and also which role is the hardest work.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's been a bit of a drier start for most of us today, although it's quite a chilly start across parts of Scotland. We could see some icy stretches along southwestern parts of Scotland, but elsewhere, generally a much drier and brighter start to the new working week. Some showers pushing in across parts of northern and central England and along eastern coast of Scotland as well, but generally it'll be a dry afternoon for most of us with plenty of sunshine around. With some light winds as well, temperatures in the south reaching 10 to 12 degrees, so probably feeling a little more pleasant than we've seen over recent days. Through the rest of Monday, a change is on the way though. Low pressure sits out towards the west, slowly moving its way towards the UK through the rest of Monday and into Tuesday. This bringing some heavy rain and showers to Northern Ireland, Wales into Northern England and southwest England too through the early hours of Tuesday morning, and quite a cloudy night for most of us as that rain arrives. Blustery winds as well, helping to keep temperatures in the south perhaps even in the double figures, but a chilly night again across parts of Scotland. Through Tuesday morning, that rain continues to push its way north and eastwards, particularly heavy across parts of eastern Scotland through Tuesday morning, where we could see some localised flooding due to that very saturated ground. Further south, showers pushing in quite quickly from the southwest. These likely to turn very heavy in places, although there will be some sunnier breaks between those showers. Temperatures in the south around 10 to 12 degrees again, but a little closer to average across northern Scotland and parts of England.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thanks, Eddie. Still to come, find out which royal has been crowned the hardest working this year. We're going to speak to the man who used to advise him or her, so we're not giving the game away.
Although you might have a little bit of an idea.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's not Harry.
I didn't ever think it would be, not even for a second, Andrew. You are watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel. Plenty more to come. Talk to you very shortly.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified on playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 10 a.m. on Monday, the 11th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and me, Pip Thompson, standing in for Bev Turner.
While the Rwanda rebellion, it spreads, divisions within the Tory party loom large ahead of the vote on the Rwanda policy tomorrow. Our political editor, Chris Hope, has the latest.
At midday today, Tory MPs on the right decide whether Sunak's plan will stop the boat. It's a key moment for the PM, but he's not here. He's at the COVID inquiry. Politics ain't easy.
As Chris said, Sunak's COVID inquiry showdown. The Prime Minister is about to give his evidence about how the government handled the pandemic. We'll cross to it shortly.
And Nigel Farage, is he the saviour of the Conservative Party as he leaves the jungle, coming third? Some Tory MPs want him to return as Prime Minister and unite with Farage to save the party. Would they get your vote? Well, Nigel gave his usual trenchant assessment on the Tories this morning.
Rudderless, leaderless, utterly useless, headed for catastrophe at the next election, deservedly so. But somehow to think that I'm going to walk out of a jungle after 23 nights and announce a relaunch in British politics, frankly, is for the birds.
Royal grafter. Princess Anne's been crowned the hardest working royal this year with 457 engagements. We'll speak to the man who used to advise her.
I like her. I do, I like Princess Anne, but I just can sense, and we'll get the insight on her, that she can be tricky.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. But she does work. I was going to say work like a dog.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit offensive, doesn't it?
No, you mean...
You know what I mean?
And she is hewn from the same block as her father, Duke of Edinburgh, who always said it as it was and often got himself into all sorts of trouble.
We like straight talkers here on GB News. Let's get your headlines now with Tamsin.
Pip, thank you, and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 10. Rishi Sunak is facing one of his toughest weeks as Prime Minister as he appears at the COVID inquiry, while MPs consider his government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda. Mr Sunak is expected to face questions over whether his Eat Out to Help Out scheme may have fuelled the spread of the virus. His appearance comes after messages showed top scientists raising concerns about a push to prioritise the economy during the pandemic. GB News reporter Ray Addison is outside the inquiry.
In a letter to the inquiry, Rishi Sunak said that senior government scientists were consulted about the scheme. However, they have since gone on to deny that. Of course, we now know that at the time, the Chief Medical Officer, Sir Chris Whitty, branded the policy Eat Out to Help Out the Virus, and Angela McLean, who's now the UK's Chief Scientific Advisor, branded Rishi Sunak Dr. Death.
Meanwhile, GB News understands 4 groups of Tory backbenchers will give their verdict on the government's Rwanda scheme at around lunchtime today. That's as the flagship bill is due to face a crunch vote tomorrow. Gary Lineker is among a number of high-profile people who've signed a letter branding the government's scheme uncaring, chaotic and costly. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says the sports presenter should stick to football.
What is moral about allowing criminal gangs to put people's lives at risk for large sums of money by trafficking them across the English Channel? What on earth has got into anyone's minds to think that we shouldn't challenge or tackle that disgusting trade in human misery? And so, again, unless he, Labour or anyone else have got a better plan, at least we're putting plans in place which are starting to have success, slashed by a third, and would do more in the future.
Parents and teachers say the regulation of schools should be more transparent and less high stakes. That's according to a new report. It found that 42% of parents support more transparency in how Ofsted judges schools, with respondents also in favour of longer and more frequent inspections. The report by policy consultancy Public First comes after a coroner found that an Ofsted inspection likely contributed to the death of head teacher Ruth Perry. Taxes have soared to the highest rate on record, raising concerns over Britain's ability to attract business and investment. New data shows property taxes are among the highest across the developed world, with the Office for Budget Responsibility signalling further hikes to come. A spokesperson for the Treasury insists the UK remains competitive, but Labour says taxpayers are being punished for the government's economic failures. The United Nations is experiencing one of its worst funding shortfalls in years, after just over a third of its required aid budget was provided last year. Humanitarian crises were estimated to cost around $57 billion over the last 12 months as conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine worsened. However, after receiving just a fraction of that amount, the UN is now lowering its expectation for the year ahead, with today's appeal for $46 billion. Aid chiefs say it's difficult to decrease aid budgets amid intensifying global conflicts, while staying realistic about what's needed. Meanwhile, Israel's war against Hamas is pressing ahead amid warnings that conditions in Gaza are worsening. The World Health Organization says the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza is becoming almost impossible to resolve. Officials say the UN is likely to vote tomorrow on a draft resolution that would demand a ceasefire. If you're dreaming of a white Christmas, you may have to settle for a wet one. More than 40 flood warnings are in place across England, with heavy rain and high winds expected. Yellow warnings for rain have also been issued for eastern Scotland from tomorrow morning until the early hours of Wednesday. It follows a weekend of washouts, with two named storms, Aileen and Fergus, sweeping across the country. And if you're driving home for Christmas, experts say you'd better plan ahead. With Christmas falling on a Monday this year, AA predicts Friday the 22nd and Saturday the 23rd to be the busiest days for traffic. Around 16.1 car journeys are expected to take place across the UK during the festive weekend. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Pip.
Well, let's see what you've been saying at home. Lots of emails coming in. And I knew Lineker would wind people up because he's an overpaid football commentator. Why do we pay 1.6 million of public money? No wonder people aren't paying. Anyway, Paul says, how dare rich people like Lineker, who live in millionaires' neighbourhood, go against getting rid of illegal migrants who be put into lower working class areas?
Helen, good morning to you. You say people keep claiming to know the will of the British people on immigration and it doesn't compare with anything I've experienced. Take it to the people, never mind an election. Let's have a referendum.
And Graham says Lineker lives in a complete fantasy land. Amazing to think anyone, especially those who are very privileged, think there are no problems with and no public concern with immigration.
And Simon, hello. If Gary Lineker and Carol Vorderman feel so strongly about the government, they should stand to be elected by a political party and seek change inside the establishment rather than just constant criticism. I think part of the reason...
I don't think Gary Lineker could afford the pay cut.
Part of the reason that I suspect Gary Lineker feels very strongly about this is he did take in a refugee.
He did, yeah.
So he will have... Like him or not, he will have quite an insight.
Yeah, I don't like him. I think he should stick to talking about football.
Thank you. Andrew, let's move on by talking about, well, more of this, actually, Rwanda, because the Rwanda policy, Rishi Sunak is facing that crucial vote on his Rwanda policy. We know what Gary Lineker feels about it. We know what Andrew feels about it. What do the rest of the Tory feel about it? Well, he's facing Rishi Sunak criticism from all sides of his party, and there's a stark warning from his former Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick that the bill will not work.
So we're going to join by our political editor, Christopher Hope, at Westminster. Chris, it's about as bad. It's looking pretty bleak for the Prime Minister, and he's not able to do the job he wants to do, meet the rebels today in the Commons, because he's got to speak to the COVID inquiry.
Yeah, that's the nature of being running a country. He's got to account for his record as Chancellor back in 2020, 2021, when, of course, he ran that furlough scheme. Some critics of that, of course, and, of course, Eat Out to Help Out in the August 2020, when we were told to go, and we're encouraged by the government to eat out at restaurants to support them in the COVID pandemic. That's when he was Chancellor. That's his record. He can try and create that, discuss that, but his mind will be elsewhere. His mind's going to be in the building behind me in Parliament, where at midday today, this European Research Group of Tory MPs and 4 other right-wing groups produce as you heard on your show half an hour ago, a 10-page report published around 1 o'clock online for all voters, reporters, MPs to read, with its verdict on whether this Rwanda bill, will stop the boats, not slow the boats. Stop the boats. That was a very clear message, I think, from your interview there with Mark Francois, the chairman of the European Research Group of Tory MPs. The problem that Mr Sunak's got is his policy, which is written on the front page of his lectern in number 10 on Thursday at the press conference I went to for GB News, says stop the boats. So unless it actually does stop the boats, stop them coming, 23,000 a year came so far this year, stop every single one of them coming, then the MPs are going to say this ain't good enough. Now, the reason, Andrew, why they're declaring their hand 36 hours before the vote tomorrow night is because they want to negotiate with the whips. They want this verdict to come out, be talked about, and then tonight there will be One Nation left-wing group of Tory MPs meets, 100 or so of them. Then there'll be arm twisting all overnight, baubles offered, knighthoods, damehoods, any kind of effort by the whips to persuade MPs to come in, row in behind this Rwanda bill. If it's voted down, it'll be the first time in 30 years that the government has lost a second reading vote. It'll be a disaster for the Chief Whip, Simon Hart. He won't want that to happen. What the government needs right now is a massive majority supporting this bill, because they've got to get through the House of Lords in January, February. The only way they can do that constitutionally is with a very big majority behind this bill. That is not guaranteed. They might even lose it. It's not easy.
And Chris, we keep hearing about what a perilous time this is for Rishi Sunak's premiership. What's your reading of it? Is it conceivable that we could have a leadership election over the next few months?
Yeah, to get there, Pip, you've got to go through a few hurdles. First of all, the government's will lose. If it loses tomorrow night's vote, there could well be a motion of no confidence put into the government itself by Labour on Wednesday. We saw that happened after the Brexit votes, the meaningful votes back in late 2018 by Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. That could happen. The Tories would win that. They always will win a confidence vote with their majority. But that will mean people are less secure about the PM as leader. We heard earlier from Nigel Farage was asked by Isabel Webster on Breakfast, would you like to form a deal, a pact with Boris Johnson and save the Tory party? Farage from the Gold Coast in Australia said, never say never. Lots of Tory MPs are saying that's why Farage could be the future of the Tory party. I asked the PM, Mr Sunak, Rishi Sunak, whether he wanted Farage back in the party. He told me twice, once last week, once in October, that we're a broad church, the Tory party. That means he's not saying no to it. So I think all bets are off, I think, for the future of this party.
All right, that's Chris Hope, our political editor. In the studio with us is Piers Pottinger. Piers Pottinger, you advised political greats, in my view, like Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
How has this Prime Minister got into such a terrible mess on an issue which normally is a strong area for the Tories? Tough on immigration, Labour hopeless on immigration.
Well, I think he's inherited a mess, and unfortunately the mess has just got bigger. He's facing a very, very tricky time today, and I suspect, though, that unless these various splinter groups of the Tories have a genuine suicidal desire, they will come round. There will be an enormous amount of wheeler dealing, as Chris has just talked about tonight, with all kinds of offers from the whips to get them to vote, to get through the second stage of the bill. And then it's down to the next reading, which will be next year. And there's also the House of Lords, who will do their utmost to wreck it,
with our friend the Archbishop of Canterbury leading the way. He's rather like Mr. Lineker and that awful Brian Cox, who should stick to acting, as Lineker should stick to presenting football highlights, in my view. But Rishi's got a very hard day today as well. There's the COVID inquiry, which, incidentally, I don't think voters are remotely interested in.
No, I think
the
you might be
COVID
right.
inquiry, because it's turned into a political witch hunt. The inquiry itself has no powers of bringing charges, either criminal or civil, against anyone, yet it's being run like a kind of Perry Mason episode by the barristers who are making fortunes out of this.
Well, they're the winners, aren't they?
They're the winners.
But you just mentioned there about
Sunak,
what voters are interested in. Are they interested on the ground, do you think, about this Rwanda policy, about illegal, or is it about the cost of living, the economy?
Well, I think immigration is, however you look at it, on any poll, the #1 issue. And it's been made the #1 issue even more by the Conservatives. And they've got to deal with it and find a way to deal with it without legal repercussions, screwing up whatever they try to do. And, I mean, Sunak, to be fair to him, when he was Chancellor during COVID, he actually did a superb job. He came up with furlough money. He did the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, which was actually the thing that was being demanded by the people millions and thousands of people who worked in the hospitality industry, and the general public, who went out and enjoyed it in their droves.
But he was also labelled Dr. Death at the time for putting lots of people at risk.
Deeply unfair and totally wrong, and in my view, a waste of the COVID inquiry's time. Because I think Rishi is a decent man. I've always respected him, but he's not a leader that connects with the British people.
Is he a leader at all?
No, I don't think I think he was probably one of the better chancellors we've had in modern times, and I think he would, if he were still chancellor, be excellent. But as a leader, no. And when it comes to voting, neither Starmer nor Sunak really have any kind of serious appeal to the voters. There's no question the two people who do are Boris and Nigel Farage. And
now,
all the talk
is there
about
any truth to this? I mean, do you think this is just Nigel, wanting to make the headlines, wanting to say never say never? Yes.
I think it's a...
Well, I have no doubt at all that if Nigel Farage was offered a safe Conservative seat with a view to potentially being the next leader, the Conservatives could win the next election.
Do you really think so?
I think so. I think Farage would make that big a difference.
The red wall?
Because all the people who are voting for reform at the moment are really... They're sort of protest votes against the Conservatives. But if Nigel was in the Conservatives and leading it, there's no doubt at all. He has enormous charisma, great connection with the British people, and as has been shown by his popularity in the jungle and on, of course, GBNews, I have absolutely no doubt that Farage could win the next general election.
Could not that create yet another faction within the Tory party, though?
Well, Tory MPs like winners. They certainly do. That's why they voted for Boris. And a lot of them have got regrets.
All the people who are worried about their seats would have a huge sigh of relief. If they can't have Boris, and in my view, they'll never bring Boris back.
No.
People don't go back, except for Cameron, and that's his foreign secretary. But and we're not going to have John Major or Theresa May back.
Please not.
Exactly. No. If they want a charismatic leader, there is only one name that people in this country are talking about.
Talking of charismatic, Princess Anne, we've discovered today, is the hardest working royal, 460, 470 official events, and she's in her 70s now. Now, you've worked with her and advised her. Is she a nice one? Is she tricky?
She's very strong-willed.
Right.
She's a terrific person to work with. She's always very well briefed. She is, of course, incredibly punctual. I've worked with her. She was the patron of one charity I was a trustee on, and all I can say is when she came to board meetings, which she always did, everyone on the board would make sure they'd done their homework before she turned up. And she was very good, because she should have really been a film actress, because with her facial expression, she uses very little expression, but with one look, It can either be withering, humorous, mischievous, and she has a way of just moving an eyebrow and looking at you, and you know exactly what she's thinking.
A little bit intimidating?
Yes, you have to be on your game, but she's got a great sense of humour. She is always engaging, can talk to anyone, and I think is an absolute beacon for the monarchy. I mean, thank goodness the royal family has the Princess Royal, because she is absolutely unimpeachable and does an incredible job working really hard for this country.
And never been even a whiff of controversy about her, unlike the King with his lobbying and his fundraising. And
well, I remember when she was a young girl, and she was quite lively, shall we put it that way. And also, believe it or not, she was once in a poll the most unpopular royal.
Was she really?
That's when she was being quite lively.
Right.
But she very quickly became the most popular royal and has really been that ever since, other than the late Queen.
And she's, for many years now, she's had the reputation of being Britain's hardest working royal.
Yes.
She's always seems to have carried out more engagements.
She does get on with it. And she's in Scotland. She's in Scotland an awful lot.
She is. And, of course, she's the patron of the Scottish rugby team.
Yeah.
And as a Scotsman myself, that's a wonderful thing. And she goes to every game, and she, without fail, she's there. And she's... the Scottish people, I think, she has a special place in their heart.
Fascinating. And, of course, she's got a rugby-playing son-in-law.
Yes, absolutely.
Mike
Well,
Tyndall.
of course, yes. He's a character too.
I'm sure he is. Talking of lively. Piers, always a joy to talk to you.
Great to be here.
Do stay with us, because still to come here on Britain's Newsroom, we'll be discussing a little bit more about a certain Mr. Farage after his, I was going to say his triumph in the jungle, but it is almost a triumph.
He came third, it was great.
It's not bad at all, not too shabby. And what his antics there mean for his political career.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Can you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What's the time? It's 10:24. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Pip Thompson, who's in for Bev Turner.
Well, it wasn't quite the outcome he'd hoped for. Nigel Farage has ended his time in the jungle in third place, which is still pretty good, after making the final of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
After coming third, here's what Nigel had to say.
Obviously, there were people there that took very different views on Brexit and other subjects. Yeah. And I never raised one political debate in there, not one in the whole time I was there. Others did with me. But I think I managed to persuade them that we should respect the right of the other person to have a different point of view. And I had no screaming arguments.
No, there wasn't any
I mean, Fred
arguments.
wanted to have screaming arguments. He kept sort of poking me with a stick. Yeah. But no, we had proper debates. And I think in the end, I hope the other campmates respected my point of view. So no big fallouts. And yeah, if the public had put me number 3, I couldn't be more thrilled.
Well, joining us to talk about all this is showbiz journalist Rebecca Tomey. Good morning to you, Rebecca. Nigel mentioned there about no big fallouts, and actually that will have shocked people who maybe predicted he would have come to blows a lot more with certain individuals than he did. But what he was able to do, I think, was disagree agreeably with people, and that's quite a skill.
Well, obviously, it's a brilliant skill, but I think what ITV and the public wanted Farage to be is the pantomime villain. They wanted the big bad wolf of the camp, create all this drama, bring in the politics, try and convert and corrupt the general masses into his ideology. And what actually happened is, as he's just said himself, he provided fair, balanced debate, conversation, not confrontation, spoke with respect, respected other people's views, and held his own views to account without it having to turn into aggression, which I think is what some people might be disappointed in terms of in these scenarios, especially in the jungle. You want tempers to flare, you want them to be hungry and tired and deprived and have these big arguments. But it just showed how good Nigel is at holding his own and just being a generally lovely campmate. And it also showed the person behind the politics. He is just a nice guy who can muck in, get on with everyone and do the task. And I think the public like him for that. I don't think anyone would have appreciated him constantly talking about his political views on the show, because that's not what it's about. It's an entertainment show.
Do you think he has appealed to the younger demographic, if you like, because I'm a Celebrity is watched by a lot of younger people. I mean, Andrew here doesn't know half of the people who are in it.
No, I don't.
Apart from Nigel.
Yes, it has always been more of a family show, so the whole family normally watch it together. But with the younger audience, the thing is, they will connect with Farage. They did with Matt Hancock last year, who also came third, exactly the same position. Maybe it's now, the former politician's position is third place on I'm a Celebrity. So I think the younger audiences will like to recognise him. They'll like the quirks. They'll want a picture taken with him, a selfie. They'll probably follow him on TikTok. The difference here is, will they vote? Does this generation vote anyway? And will that translate to following someone on TikTok, knowing who they are, thinking they're this lovable character on an entertainment show? Will that translate to politics? And that's where I'm not so sure. I'm not necessarily against politicians or former politicians going on to entertainment shows. What I worry about is the reasons behind it, because former celebrities who've been in popular culture go on, generally I'm a Celebrity, to resurrect their careers, to get a book deal, to get more followers on social media, to release another single. That's generally why they do it. Obviously, the money is very attractive as well, but that's normally what happens. So whether this is a case where politicians start going on I'm a Celebrity to reignite a career, that's what's different, because it's supposed to be entertainment and fun. And I think when it starts to become about trying to gain voters, we sort of start to veer dangerously away from what politics should be and what entertainment should be, and you end up voting for someone just because they're famous. This is what concerns me. Whereas I think maybe entertainment shows like I'm a Celebrity should just stay like that. But it seems to have worked for Farage, because I think he's incredibly popular. Obviously he came third and people really liked him, particularly the younger audiences.
All right, Rebecca, thanks for that. Showbiz journalist Rebecca Toomey. Piers Possinger's still here. Piers, you've advised all sorts of people in public life, from products and personalities. Brand Farage is quite valuable today.
Oh, yes. And I think, on balance, he did the right thing. I was very nervous about him appearing, but he held his own superbly, despite immense provocation. And I think he won over a lot of people who doubted the wisdom of doing this.
Would you have advised him not to do it then?
Yes. I mean, I'll be honest, if he'd said, do you think I should do this, I'd say no. But don't forget, Matt Hancock also came third.
And I'm not sure that it's actually done masses for Matt Hancock.
No, I don't think it did. Well, he was a sitting MP, and that's slightly different. I think with Nigel, it has shown that he is capable of discussing serious subjects with a wide range of people. And as he said in that clip there, that he's been able to get one or two of those other contestants to understand that to respect other people's views, rather than just shout at them and abuse them for having a different opinion. So I think he's done Brand Farage a lot of good, which I think was, I would have bet against that before. Now I think he's done that. I'm sure you'll get offers for Panto next year. But actually, as I said earlier, I think, you know, he is without any doubt the #1 politician in this country, political figure in this country, who the general public really identify with. And I think, you know, whichever party, if he does actually stand, of course, you've got to set against that. He's stood 7 times as an MP and not been elected. But I think if he was directed towards the right kind of seat, for whichever party he stood, he would sweep in as an MP and could end up leading that party in Parliament. Now, whether it's the Reform or the Conservative, or both, we'll have to wait and see. But surely now the time has come. I mean, never is he going to have an opportunity like this again, with 2 principal leaders who the public really can't really get behind either one of them. This is Farage's big opportunity.
And he's a canny operator, isn't he?
He's a very shrewd operator. He's proved that. And I mean, I would imagine he'd be sitting down with his closest advisors and saying, OK, it's now or never, is it? And whatever he does, it'll be very interesting to see.
And would it be best for him to do I'm a Celeb and leave it at that, rather than, like Matt Hancock did, rather than doing Strictly or doing Celebs Go Dating? Not that I'm sure he would do that because he's in a relationship, but
I don't think he needs to do any more. No, he's made his point, he's done it. And I'm a Celebrity, actually, it has had a much lower audience this season. Its opening show was, I think, 9 million, which is 2 million down on the previous year. So even as a programme itself, it may be running out of steam a bit. But I think, he's done his showbiz bit, and he's done it cleverly and well, and he did it with dignity. Very hard to do. And I think, even if you disagree with most of his opinions, you have a sneaking admiration for him. Because he's also a man with impeccable manners, great charm, who I know many people who disagree with almost everything he says, but admire him and respect him.
Absolutely. Yep, that's
He's got
Nigel
the neck
Farage.
of a giraffe, hasn't he?
He has.
He is a tough cookie.
Which you need in politics, of course. You certainly do. Now, still to come, taxing times. The British tax burden across the economy has increased to its highest rate on record. Shocking. We'll begin discussing that shortly.
Much more to come after your latest headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thank you. Here are the headlines at 10:33. The Prime Minister is expected to face questions soon over whether his Eat Out to Help Out scheme helped spread the COVID-19 virus. Mr Sunak's appearance at the COVID inquiry comes after messages showed top scientists raising concerns about a push to prioritise the economy during the pandemic. GB News understands 5 groups of Tory backbenchers will give their verdict on the government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda at around lunchtime today, ahead of a vote tomorrow. Gary Lineker is among several high-profile personalities who've signed a letter describing the policy as uncaring, chaotic and costly. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says deterrence is a key part of the plan.
What is moral about allowing criminal gangs to put people's lives at risk for large sums of money by trafficking them across the English Channel? What on earth has got into anyone's minds to think that we shouldn't challenge or tackle that disgusting trade in human misery? And so, again, unless he, Labour or anyone else have got a better plan, at least we're putting plans in place which are starting to have success, slashed by a third, and would do more in the future.
Well, if you're driving home for Christmas, experts say you'd better plan ahead. With Christmas falling on a Monday this year, the AA predicts Friday the 22nd and Saturday the 23rd to be the busiest days for traffic. Around 16.1 million car journeys are expected to take place across the UK during the festive weekend. Well, you can get more on all of those stories. Just visit our website, gbnews.com.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.256 and €1.1662 euros. The price of gold is £1,587 and 52 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,525 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, still to come, former Labour advisor Matthew Lauser will take on broadcaster Emma Wolfe over today's top story. Well, take her on, but disagree quite a lot.
That's very dramatic, this.
Yes, exactly.
Stay tuned.
No
pressure
there. No, very good. And, of course, there is yet another shocking story about an XL bully dog attack at a London railway station. So don't miss this. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with you three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. We're going to be going through the papers shortly, but the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, is now giving evidence at the COVID inquiry. Let's listen in.
Observation to me at the time.
Do you happen to recall, it's probably quite a long shot, but do you recall changing phones around that time as it happened?
Not around that time, as I said. I have changed my phone multiple times in the years since then, and as I said previously, every time that's happened, the messages wouldn't have come across. But as I said, I'm not a prolific user of WhatsApp, and with the private office, again, that would have all been recorded formally on the record, or indeed where I've had exchanges with other individuals. Some of those have been part of the evidence that's formed the inquiry's deliberations.
They have indeed, and I should make plain that we've got some of your messages from the other interlocutors to the communications. Now, turning to the role of Chancellor of the Exchequer, and it is, of course, because you were Chancellor of the Exchequer that your evidence today is of the greatest importance. You describe how, in your statement, how there was obviously, throughout the currency of the entire crisis, a clash between public health epidemiological considerations and economic and fiscal issues, both by way of the economic considerations which had to be taken into account by the government, and also the vast economic and societal damage that would be done by decisions such as lockdowns. In that debate, which raged throughout the pandemic, what was the general position of the Chancellor of the Exchequer? What position generally did you and Her Majesty's Treasury take?
Well, I don't think I ever referred to it as a clash. I think I saw my role as Chancellor of the Exchequer as making sure that the Prime Minister had the best possible advice, information, analysis relating to the economic impact or consequences of some of the decisions that he was having to make. Obviously, the Chancellor of the Exchequer's role is to be responsible for the country's economic and fiscal policy and the financial services sector. So that was my primary responsibility in the role. And then as it pertained to the pandemic, my jobs were not just to design and implement economic interventions like the furlough scheme or support for public services and businesses, but also, as I said, to provide analysis and advice to the Prime Minister as he made his decisions. And more broadly, just touching on what you said at the beginning, Mr. Keith, as a senior cabinet minister, one of the consistent arguments or points that I made from the beginning throughout was just making sure that we collectively in the Prime Minister considered the totality of the impacts of the decisions that we were making. It wasn't, as I didn't ever describe it as a clash just between public health and economics. I think that's to think about it in far too narrow a way. As many people have alluded to, and I did at the time, there were a range of impacts, many of them socioeconomic, the impact on children's education, on mental health, on the issue in the criminal justice system, as well as the pure economic impact. And it was important that policymakers considered the totality of those, and that was a consistent point throughout. But obviously, my particular responsibility was the economy and fiscal policy.
You do, I think, refer to how the issues confronting the government consisted of highly compelling competing interests.
That is Prime Minister Rishi Sunak being quizzed at the COVID inquiry by lead counsel Hugo Keith KC, who we saw questioning Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, last week. And at the top, actually, of this session, Rishi Sunak said he was deeply sorry to all those who lost loved ones during the pandemic, and that it is important we learn the lessons. He's expected to face questions, certainly, about eat out to help out and whether that idea actually fueled the spread of coronavirus.
Yeah, because I'm suggesting that one of the chief science officers didn't know anything about it, which I must say I find hard to believe. We're joined in studio by former Labour advisor Matthew Larser and also broadcaster Emma Wolfe. Morning to you both. Emma, we talked about this wretched inquiry. It's going on and on and on. Is it making you any the wiser?
No, absolutely not. I think we've had a parade of, top politicians now, the top sort of ministers saying, not my fault, not on my watch kind of thing. I think it's becoming very clear that, A, the inquiry is not really going to address or explore the issues that many of us are concerned about. B, that we had the wrong group of people, whether it's personality, whether it's decision-making, whether it's experience. We had the wrong group of people in number 10 and around number 10 during this crisis, which was an unprecedented crisis.
We also had the lack of a plan.
A lack of a plan. And I think the question for me throughout this has been, if this happened again tomorrow, and we have, we often have reports of a spike, a bird flu, something has been found somewhere. If this happened again tomorrow or next week, would we fare any better? Do we have a plan now? Would we have another lockdown? What would the consequences be? Because all we can do really is going forward, that loathsome phrase, all we can do is make a plan for the future. Would things be any better? Because the people who lost loved ones did lose loved ones.
Yeah, of course. Matthew, what do you think?
Well, I think that, political theatre is always entertaining, but it's not necessarily important and valuable. I mean, it's, seeing Rishi squirm, I think that you should say there'll be the row about who knew what about help out to eat out to help out. But actually, what worries me is that the whole inquiry is coming from one perspective, which is that closing down, basically, why didn't we close down more? Why didn't we lock down sooner and deeper? Rather than asking, should we have locked down at all, or should we have followed other examples?
Baroness Hallett did ask Boris Johnson about that last week, actually. She did interject during his questioning and ask him, did you consider the arguments against lockdown? And then he gave it short shrift.
He did give it very short shrift, and I think that's because I think part of that why he gave it such short shrift is because he will be knowing the mood music around the inquiry and the line of questioning you've seen from the KCs who are doing the interrogations. So I mean, the other thing is it's just going on. It's going to go on for so long. Sweden, never mind the Swedish model. Sweden did its inquiry in about 6 months. It's available in English on their website.
But I also hope that Rishi Sunak, he's in the chair today, Emma, is going to be asked, did you do a financial audit of the cost implications to the economy of closing it down? And if you didn't, why didn't you? If you did, where is it?
What is it? Where is it exactly? Yeah. Did you go through those decisions? I think it's been clear to us that we've absolutely, we put the economy into the deep freeze for 2 years. I think it's very, very clear that it had a catastrophic impact. And one of the first stories today is the impact of COVID and lockdown on children and young people and their mental health. And it's one thing adults going through a crisis like that, but when you look at the impact on babies. I had a baby in lockdown, on children and young people, on their education, on their social, on their mental health. It's absolutely appalling. This is the first story in The Sun.
Yeah.
It's a report, really interesting report, which I think came out yesterday from the Centre for Social Justice, which was set up by Ian Duncan Smith and published that report 20 years ago, Broken Britain. And a really wide-ranging study, which just shows the appalling impact. I think if any evidence was needed about the impact of lockdown, 1 in 5 children and 1 in 4 older teenagers are now suffering from a mental illness. Anxiety, depression, eating disorders have spiked, all of that. But also 13.4 million people now living in poverty as a result of the lockdown. We were already in a very precarious state with stagnant wages, poor housing, chronic ill health, all of that. And they're saying, this report says, the pandemic was the dynamite that blew that apart. Calls to domestic abuse helplines soared by 700%. If you're locked down, let's think about lockdown. If you're locked down in a house with an abusive partner, that is absolutely catastrophic. If you're a child who doesn't have money, doesn't have Wi-Fi, doesn't have access to outdoor space, and you're locked down, that is a terrible, terrible legacy. And this is a legacy for children, When you're 13, 14 and you go through this, you don't recover in the way that I think...
I think it's a classic example of politicians whose lives are often apart, and particularly, you know, I would say this, wouldn't I, but actually if you look at the backgrounds of the senior politicians in the cabinet, we've got so many people of great wealth and so many old Etonians, etc. They just can't conceive of somebody stuck, you know, with a teenager in a tower block on the 20th floor of a tower block with no Wi-Fi. I mean, it just isn't in their ken. I mean, it's not that they sort of, you know, being horribly rejecting it, it's just not on their worldview.
OK. Let's just talk about something else, some pictures that viewers would like to see. Now, imagine you're on your daily commute to work and you come across this. 2 XL bully-type dogs appearing to be out of control on the train platform. A terrifying moment which happened in East London.
Yeah. Now, Matthew, can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, I mean, so this is... I mean, look, it could have been so much worse, but it reminds us of really how the big threat from the XL bully dogs. I mean, you know, we can see there that they're, you know, they're attacking the... or going for, maybe is the better phrase, because it's like an unnatural instinct for the other passenger on the train platform. Now, we've got, politically, of course, this has been a big issue, and we've got the a ban on XL bully dogs is coming in on the 31st of December, the part 1 of the ban. But this is what's worrying me is this is coming under the Dangerous Dogs Act, which is from the 1990s and is regarded as a textbut example of the worst legislation that went horribly wrong when we had, I think it was pit bulls was the main issue then. So one of the unintended consequences, because obviously we all want to prevent scenes like that, one of the concerns is from vets is that dogs are now going to be inside houses because people don't want to take them out, although it's still going to be legal, people are going to be discouraged, you know, there's a social stigma to doing it, and will there be more attacks because they're not going to be getting enough exercise? So it's one of those things where politicians come with an seemingly easy solution, which frankly we all in theory support, but it might not work.
But how does it work? I'm actually sick to the back teeth of demonising the XL bully type dog like this because, and I say this as somebody who has dogs myself, not enough attention is being paid to the owners. Every XL bully dog, I would say 99% of the ones I see on the streets, are with owners that have got them off the lead, that are clearly not in control of them. And to own a dog is a massive responsibility. It's like having a child. And we spend so much time talking about the dogs and not about actually the responsibility that the owners need to have, whatever dog.
With respect, what is the reason, apart from status, a sort of aggressive status symbol, what is the justification for owning a dog who's clearly bred, and they breed them, I'm not a dog owner, and you'll be the expert, but they clearly breed them to make them this kind of aggressive breed.
This is my point. That is people, again, that are breeding the dogs to look powerful, to look muscular, to look like they're going to attack. It comes back to humans.
So if they ban this, they will go for something else.
That are creating a danger. And what the worry is now is the focus is now on the XL bully, and they'll be banned. And then the focus will go on to other dogs, such as the Cane Corso, for example. And unscrupulous people will start buying them and breeding from them and then making them vicious and, you know, fighting dogs.
Because there'll always be people who seek out dogs like that.
But what we see on that Stratford train station this morning, as someone with a young child, and you think of prams and children at that level, absolutely terrifies me. The woman just about manages.
Absolutely.
And obviously goes on to the tracks to electrify.
What is the woman doing in charge of 2 dogs? She should not be in charge of 2 big dogs like that. Again, it comes back to the owner.
Yeah, but it may be it comes back to it, but the fact is these dogs can be dangerous. They are like loaded
dog
guns.
Can be dangerous,
any dog can turn. And she's barely got them under control.
These dogs, they're like bears. They're so
Andrew,
big.
I heard stories in fact, I've heard a number of stories about. I heard one last week. Cocker spaniels. Now everybody has cockapoos. They're one of the most popular dogs in the country. Cocker spaniels can turn like that. Any dog potentially in the wrong situation can turn like that. And I have to say, in a train station, that can be a very triggering environment for dogs. The noise, you know, the situation, if they've never been
the movement,
I'm not... Well, I think I've made my point clear.
But what I also don't understand is how does the ban work? So what do they do? Are people going to turn up with someone who's got a dog, we're taking that away from you? They're not going to put any of them down.
No,
they're not putting them down.
So it's a two-stage ban.
Yeah.
So the ban it comes in on New Year's Eve, oddly, not New Year's Day, is on selling, rehoming or gifting the dog. So that's the first stage of the ban, so basically to stop the spread of the breed. And then I think it's in March, the second stage comes in, which means you have to register your dog under the Dangerous Dogs Act, and then it becomes illegal to own the dog unless it's registered.
And where do you register it?
I presumably you do it online at a government gateway.
But then how many people are going to go underground and not register their dogs?
Because we don't have dog licences, we don't have dog inspectors paid for by that. So I don't quite see how it's going to be enforced, but presumably it just means that if your dog does get into trouble and it turns out you didn't register it, you get an extra penalty. But I don't think there's going to be much in the way of sort of double-checking and prevention.
Fascinating, isn't it? We're running out of time, so we are going to talk about Gary Lineker a little later, of course, because I know you're a great fan. Emma's a great fan.
Andrew loves talking about
I love talking about Gary Lineker. He's a ridiculous man. So he's given us his unwanted thoughts on the Rwanda policy. Give us all strength.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. It's been a bit of a drier start for most of us today, although quite a chilly start across parts of Scotland. We could see some icy stretches along southwestern parts of Scotland, but elsewhere, generally a much drier and brighter start to the new working week. Some showers pushing in across parts of northern and central England and along eastern coast of Scotland as well, but generally it'll be a dry afternoon for most of us with plenty of sunshine around. With some light winds as well, temperatures in the south reaching 10 to 12 degrees, so probably feeling a little more pleasant than we've seen over recent days. Through the rest of Monday, a change is on the way though. Low pressure sits out towards the west, slowly moving its way towards the UK through the rest of Monday and into Tuesday. This bringing some heavy rain and showers to Northern Ireland, Wales into Northern England and southwest England too through the early hours of Tuesday morning, and quite a cloudy night for most of us as that rain arrives. Blustery winds as well, helping to keep temperatures in the south perhaps even in the double figures, but a chilly night again across parts of Scotland. Through Tuesday morning, that rain continues to push its way north and eastwards, particularly heavy across parts of eastern Scotland through Tuesday morning, where we could see some localised flooding due to that very saturated ground. Further south, showers pushing in quite quickly from the southwest. These likely to turn very heavy in places, although there will be some sunnier breaks between those showers. Temperatures in the south around 10 to 12 degrees again, but a little closer to average across northern Scotland and parts of England.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thanks very much, Ellie. Stay with us. We're going to be getting the view of a Labour MP on the ongoing Rwanda rift. That's a bit of an understatement, isn't it?
It's the understatement of the year.
What would Sir Keir Starmer, what would he do differently? You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News, the People's Channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 11 a.m. on Monday, the 11th of December. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Pip Thompson, who's in for Bev Turner.
Rwanda rebellion. Divisions within the Conservative Party loom large ahead of the vote on the Rwanda policy tomorrow. Our political editor, Chris Hope, has the latest.
It's like the Brexit wars all over again as Tory MPs fight over what sovereignty means. This time, not Brexit, but small boats and Rwanda.
And Sunak's COVID inquiry showdown. The Prime Minister is giving evidence about how the government handled the pandemic. We'll bring you any updates from the inquiry as they happen.
Farage to save the Tories. As Nigel Farage leaves the jungle, some Conservative MPs want Boris Johnson to return as Prime Minister and unite with Nigel Farage to save the party. Would they get your vote? Nigel gave his damning assessment of the Tories earlier.
Rudderless, leaderless, utterly useless, headed for catastrophe at the next election, deservedly so. But somehow to think that I'm going to walk out of a jungle after 23 nights and announce a relaunch in British politics, frankly, is for the birds.
And transphobic tweet. The Conservative Party Deputy Chairwoman Rachel McLean is in hot water because she shared a tweet calling a transgender woman a man who wears a wig and calls himself a proud lesbian. Now, this is the Green Party candidate for Bromsgrove, Melissa Poulton's response.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it is a transphobic comment. It's dog whistling at the finest, you know. It's whisper, it's gaslighting, it's everything. By attacking a minority group, is just, yeah, you know, it's a shame.
So let us know your thoughts on all that and more by emailing gbviews@gbnews.com, and do leave us your name and where you're watching or listening from. Now, here's your latest headlines with Tamsin.
Pip, thanks very much and good morning from the GB Newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 11.
The Prime Minister has apologised to victims of the pandemic as he gives evidence at the COVID inquiry. He's facing questions including whether his Eat Out to Help Out scheme helped spread the COVID-19 virus. Mr Sunak's apology comes after messages showed top scientists raising concerns about a push to prioritise the economy during the pandemic.
How deeply sorry I am to all of those who lost loved ones, family members through the pandemic, and also all those who suffered in the various different ways throughout the pandemic and as a result of the actions were taken. I've thought a lot about this over the past couple of years. It's important that we learn the lessons so that we can be better prepared in the future, and it's in that spirit and with enormous respect for all of those who are affected that I'm here today.
GB News understands 5 groups of Tory backbenchers will give their verdict on the government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda at around lunchtime today. That's as the bill heads for a crunch vote tomorrow in what's said to be an important week for the Prime Minister. Gary Lineker is among several high-profile personalities who've signed a letter describing the policy as uncaring, chaotic and costly. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps says he should stick to football.
What is moral about allowing criminal gangs to put people's lives at risk for large sums of money by trafficking them across the English Channel? What on earth has got into anyone's minds to think that we shouldn't challenge or tackle that disgusting trade in human misery? And so, again, unless he, Labour or anyone else have got a better plan, at least we're putting plans in place which are starting to have success, slashed by a third, and would do more in the future.
Parents and teachers say the regulation of schools should be more transparent and less high stakes. That's according to a new report. It found that 42% of parents support more transparency in how Ofsted judges schools, with respondents also in favour of longer and more frequent inspections. The report by policy consultancy Public First comes after a coroner found that an Ofsted inspection likely contributed to the death of head teacher Ruth Perry. The United Nations is experiencing one of its worst funding shortfalls in years after just over a third of its required aid budget was provided last year. Humanitarian crises were estimated to cost around $57 billion over the last 12 months as conflicts in Gaza and Ukraine worsened. However, after receiving just a fraction of that amount, the UN is now lowering its expectation for the year ahead with today's appeal for $46 billion. Aid chiefs say it's difficult to decrease aid budgets amid intensifying global conflicts while staying realistic about what's needed. Meanwhile, Israel's war against Hamas is pressing ahead amid warnings that conditions in Gaza are worsening. The World Health Organization says the catastrophic humanitarian situation in Gaza is becoming almost impossible to resolve. Officials say the UN is likely to vote tomorrow on a draft resolution that would demand a ceasefire. Taxes have soared to the highest rate on record, raising concerns over Britain's ability to attract business and investment. New data shows property taxes are among the highest across the developed world, with the Office for Budget Responsibility signalling further hikes to come. A spokesperson for the Treasury insists the UK remains competitive, but Labour says taxpayers are being punished for the government's economic failures. Dengue fever could become a national domestic disease in England by 2060 because of climate change. Government health experts say warmer conditions are to blame for the spread of the Asian tiger mosquito, known for its potential of the spread of the disease. The UK Health Security Agency warns the mosquito could become commonplace across England over the next 2 to 3 decades. Officials say warmer weather brings a higher risk of several diseases and more pandemics. And if you're driving home for Christmas, experts say you'd better plan ahead. With Christmas falling on a Monday this year, the AA predicts Friday the 22nd and Saturday the 23rd to be the busiest days for traffic. Around 16.1 million car journeys are expected to take place across the UK during the festive weekend. That's all from me for now. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker. Just say play GB News. Now it's back to Andrew and Pip.
Well, let's see what you've been saying at home, and you've been getting in touch. Nigel really has a little touch paper here, hasn't he? Funny that, he often does. Carol says, I hope Nigel and Boris stand with Richard and Reform. Together they would be unbeatable and wipe the floor with the other parties. But which one would be leader?
Oh, they'd have to toss a coin.
Nigel or Boris? Because I don't think either of them are very good at taking orders. Would be interesting, wouldn't it?
Two egos in the room. Not sure about that, Andrew. Monica, good morning. You say, I'm sorry, but Piers Pottinger saying Reform voters would vote for the Conservatives if Nigel Farage was in the party is wrong. I wouldn't vote for the Tories, as over half of them just don't represent Conservative values, but rather lean left. Nigel's presence would make no difference.
Well, that's interesting. And Eric says, good morning. Even in my opinion, even Nigel can't save the Tory party. As a floating voter, I think the country's had enough of their lies and failed promise. It was it was Jim Callaghan who said in 1979 that Mrs Thatcher was leader of the opposition. Sometimes you get to a point when voters have just made their mind up.
Yeah.
They've had enough, and it doesn't matter what the government of the day says or does, they've made their mind up, and it feels like that to me.
And it's been 13 years, it will be 14 years, and it's a natural time for change.
Yeah, and Callaghan was talking 79. Labour had only been in power for 5 years. But they were on their second Prime Minister. He was unelected because Wilson had stood down, because probably the beginning of Alzheimer's. And it's a similar situation. I mean, the Tories are on they're on their fifth Prime Minister since 2016.
So how could all this talk of a potential leadership election, how could that help the situation?
Well, they'd have to go to the country immediately. There's the next day. They'd have to call the general election, because I think otherwise there'd be a peasants' revolt. People would be there with their pitchforks and spades saying, bring down the government, because we're fed up with it. I really do.
Well, is Rishi Sunak on the ropes? He is facing a crucial vote, as we keep saying, on his Rwanda policy tomorrow. He's facing criticism from both sides of his party and will meet with separate factions later today to discuss the policy. Well,
when he gets out of the COVID inquiry, that is. We're joined now by our political editor, Chris Hope, from Westminster. Chris, the timing for Rishi Sunak couldn't be worse, because obviously he's had to do a lot of preparation for the evidence he's giving to the COVID inquiry. He's going to be in the hot seat for probably 6 hours today, when what he really wants to be doing is talking to MPs, inviting them into his Commons office, very nice, come and sit next to me, offering them blandishments for their constituencies. You know the usual stuff.
Yes, 100%, Andrew and Pip. He'll be tuning into GB News at lunchtime, because I can reveal that the ERG and the other four right-wing ginger groups who are looking at this Rwanda bill in some detail with the Star Chamber, they will reveal at 12:45 p.m. their verdict. Now, if they come down and say this Rwanda bill won't work, it won't stop the boats, then there's an absolute crisis erupting here in Westminster. And the PM is in the wrong place. He's miles away in Paddington, talking about the time when he was Chancellor 2 years ago. It's not ideal. That's politics. You know, this crisis really is one of his own making. He has said from the beginning he wanted to stop the boats. As Mark Francois told you on your programme an hour and a half ago, he said stop the boats was very clearly an absolute position. Not reduce the boats, not cut them by 20%, not cut them by 30%. Which is what has happened so far this year because of a deal with Albania and poor weather on the Channel. He says stop the boats. And if this legislation won't do that, he is in some trouble. The vote's tomorrow night. Our government hasn't lost that vote in 3 decades. What is likely, though, is probably that many critics will abstain and come back in the new year and try and edit this Rwanda bill, amend it to use the parliamentary language and change it so it suits their interests better. But it's a very narrow wire upon which Mr Sunak is walking along today. He's got to please the right, who report at lunchtime, and the left of the party, the One Nation group, report tonight. If they think it's going too far away from the ECHR, the Human Rights Act, they will also reject it. It's not easy being Tory leader.
And Chris, another issue, I think the problem the Prime Minister has is dozens of Tory MPs are standing down at the next election. So the Prime Minister's got nothing he can do to bully them or persuade them to support him because they're going to be former MPs at the next election. So they are not biddable. And if they decide they're going to vote against this, then he's in big, big trouble.
Well, not obviously. There are all sorts of tricks that governments can pull to ensure they win support. They can offer knighthoods, damehoods, other baubles, you know, make your wife a lady if you can become a knight, that kind of thing. All these things work as these MPs try and think about their future post-election if they are standing down. There are quango jobs that can be promised. Of course, if a Labour Party win next election, those job offers might be withdrawn pretty quickly. But there are all sorts of offers they can make. And believe me, it's really important they're being made today by the whips, because if there's no big majority, Andrew and Pip, tomorrow in this vote, then the peers, the House of Lords, no one's talking about them, they all feel emboldened to try and edit, to amend this Rwanda bill and water it down, because the Tory party does not have a majority in the House of Lords.
All right, that's Chris Hope, who is our political editor. It's going to be a tense time in the next 24 hours.
And as Chris mentioned there, the House of Lords, I mean, that could turn into a game of ping-pong, couldn't it?
They will savage the bill, in my view, because it's full of lots of ex-judges, lots of lawyers, lots of human rights types. They will pull it apart, and then if it comes back to the Commons, in what state is it? What state is it in? But Chris is right. If the Commons were to give it a decisive, big majority, then the Lords would feel they have to reflect the view of the elected chamber. But their role is as revisers. They're the revising chamber, so they can revise it. But if it's got a scrappy majority, they'll pull it to pieces.
So, such a difficult time, then, for the Prime Minister at the moment. But someone who must be rubbing his hands together over this Tory turmoil is Steve McCabe, who's the Labour MP for Selly Oak in Birmingham. Good morning, Steve. Good to see you. Are you just sitting back there watching it all unfold? You're looking very relaxed this morning.
Well, I'm not giving evidence to the COVID inquiry or worrying about what's going to happen in 24 hours. So I suppose I am. Look, I think it's just further evidence that they're in quite a lot of difficulty, and the Prime Minister in particular is under a great deal of pressure.
Steve, the Labour Party, obviously you're in opposition. Your job is to oppose but to come up with constructive alternatives. I can't remember, perhaps you can refresh my memory, what great plan you've got to cut migration to 200,000, which is what one of your colleagues said you would do.
Well, I'm not sure that we have agreed on an exact figure, because I think that is subject to the demands of the economy. But I think the three major issues that Labour have identified are: we want to close the skills gap so that there's less demand for foreign labour. We want to have offshore processing centres so that we can separate legitimate from non-legitimate asylum seekers and deal with that process more quickly. And we want to actually be specific about how migrant labour is used. So, for example, the current 20% discount on wages is an incentive to employ migrant labour, and we think we should stop that.
Do you think, when it comes to the voters, do you feel that it is immigration that is the deciding issue for voters at the next election, or is it the cost of living?
Oh, I think it's the cost of living by a mile. I think this is the danger of listening to too small a core of your own voters, your own supporters. I think the immigration issue is certainly playing in the Tory party. And I'm not saying it doesn't matter in other places, but I think it's the cost of living by a mile.
And Steve, do you what are you hearing? An election coming up soon. How quickly would Labour be prepared for an election? You ready now?
Well, if it comes tomorrow, we'd be ready. But look, I think it is possible that it could come earlier than May if he was to get into real trouble. But I guess most people would still put their money on May or October as the most likely dates.
And are you complacent in your constituency? What are you, 20 points ahead currently in the polls?
Well, I don't think it ever pays to be complacent. I mean, if you want to win and you want to win with a working majority, then you should never take it for granted. You have to earn votes and you have to earn support. Actually, what we're seeing at the moment is the price of complacency in the Tory government.
Well, what about the dream ticket, then, of Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson coming together to lead the Tory party to glorious victory at the next election, Steve? Does that fill you with fear and dread, or are you laughing at the idea?
Well, I think you'd turn the whole country into candidates for I'm a Celebrity, get me out of here.
You're not. So you wouldn't fear those two as a deadly duo.
That sounds to me like something a team of very good comedy writers would dream up.
What do you think of the claim, though, that Labour simply hasn't earned its time to be in government again? Labour could end up in government by default, not because it's earned the opportunity. And actually, you're just a party of flip-floppers.
Well, as I've just said, I think you do actually have to work for every vote. I think we have earned it. I think the changes that Keir Starmer has instituted in the Labour Party show that he's a change agent and willing to take on difficult issues. And if it comes to earning it, what the Conservative Party have done is throw away the right to govern that they may have earned in 2019, but they certainly don't possess now.
All right, well, that's Steve McCabe saying he's not complacent, but not thinking much, Pip, to this idea of Boris and Nigel Farage. Steve, great to talk to you. Always a pleasure. Still to come, we're going to talk all about being in the jungle and what happens to life afterwards. Our very Christine Hamilton, who appeared on the very first series of I'm a Celebrity, she's going to give her thoughts on Nigel Farage's performance and if she thinks it'll boost his political career.
You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News.
Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:23, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and I nearly said Bev Turner. You're not Bev Turner. You're Pip Thompson. Who's in for Bev Turner?
Well, it wasn't quite the outcome he'd hoped for. Nigel Farage has ended his time in the jungle in 3rd place after making the final of I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
So he came 3rd, and here's what he had to say when he emerged.
Obviously, there were people there that took very different views on Brexit and other subjects. And I never raised one political debate in there, not one in the whole time I was there. Others did with me. But I think I managed to persuade them that we should respect the right of the other person to have a different point of view. And I had no screaming arguments.
No, there wasn't any
I mean,
screaming
Fred
arguments.
wanted to have screaming arguments. He kept sort of poking me with a stick. But no, we had proper debates. And I think in the end, I hope the other campmates respected my point of view. So no big fallouts. And yeah, if the public had put me number 3, I couldn't be more thrilled.
OK, this is cracking me up. The clock we now have on screen telling you all that Nigel will be returning to GB News in 7 hours, 35 minutes and just over 30 seconds. Obviously not here. He will be doing his show live from Australia.
Well.
And he'll have exited that jungle. Won't have had time to sleep because there'll have been so much to catch up on. Because he didn't know anything that's been going on here, did he?
I'd love to know what he thinks about David Cameron now being our Foreign Secretary. David Cameron, who staged the referendum, then flounced out when it didn't go his way. David Cameron, who created Project Fear, in my view. And I suspect Nigel thinks David Cameron is everything that's wrong with the Conservative Party. Old Etonian, privileged, entitled.
I'm sure he'll be telling us tonight.
Sure, he will.
Let's get the thoughts of former I'm a Celeb contestant Christine Hamilton, who I think also finished 3rd 20 years ago, which I cannot believe, Christine. Good morning to you. How do you think Nigel did? And do you think this is the start of something now in terms of Nigel's political comeback?
Well, I think it was you, Pip, who said Nigel will be disappointed. I don't think he will. I think Nigel will be absolutely thrilled to have been 3rd. In his wildest dreams, he probably didn't think he would do any better than that. I always predicted, I'm afraid, that he wouldn't win. Politicians don't win. Sam had it in his hand almost from the beginning, and it was very difficult to compete with that. So I think Nigel did absolutely brilliantly. He showed people what he's really like, and the public liked it. There were no tantrums, there was no this, there was no political lecturing, etc. He just answered the questions. And of course, he did the trials brilliantly. And that actually counts quite a lot in that jungle thing. People don't like wimps, and he proved that he wasn't a wimp. But do you know, the idea that he's going to come back and leap into bed with Boris Johnson is just fantasy. Why would you strap yourself to a sinking ship? I mean, why would you? The Tory party is everything at the moment. The Tory party, everything that Nigel rejects, everything I reject, everything any true Tory would reject. They're social democrats, and the idea that he would team up with Boris is moonshine, but he's done brilliantly.
Do you think, Christine, of course, he's almost like an honorary member of the Reform Party. Richard Tice leads that party, and we've got people like Ben Habib are very big in the party. Nigel hasn't done much. Do you think, if you were advising him, you would say to him, get back into the thick of the battle with Reform, whether he could bear to run for Parliament again, because he has tried and failed 7 times?
Yeah. Well, Nigel, I think, is president of Reform. So he's got an honorary position. I think probably his thought was, he didn't want to lead it, was to step back and let Richard Tice have his moment, as it were. So, I mean, if Nigel had tried to do a co-leadership thing, that would have trodden on Richard's toes. So I think he was right to step back and let Richard lead it. But as you say, he has failed 7 times. My guess is he won't want to stand for Parliament again. But my goodness, look what he's achieved in his lifetime, never having been in Parliament. He's achieved more than most MPs. I mean, come on, Andrew. I bet even you, with your incredible political antennae, can't name the cabinet. Everybody knows who Farage is, love him or loathe him. He's got visibility, which, of course, is one thing that a lot of politicians haven't got, and, of course, they dearly would love to have. So, you know, he's got a hell of a lot going for him, which is more than you can say for the Tories.
Yeah, I mean, he is without doubt one of the most significant politicians of the last 30 years, isn't he?
Oh, 100%. When you look at what he's achieved, he has literally changed this country. And it's just a pity that the government didn't pick up and run with what he handed to them, which was Brexit. But let's not go there. Let's not cry over spilt milk and wasted opportunities. But the Tories are behaving like Social Democrats. And I think the public is completely fed up with them. They've had 13 years. But, you know, it's what always happens with the Tories. Ever since the war, the Tories get in and all they do, they don't ratchet back what Labour have done. The only person who got in and said, right, we are going to dismantle all this socialism was Margaret Thatcher, and we haven't had a leader since her. The Tory party has just slowly shifted, and Cameron took control of the candidates list when he was Prime Minister. He put in all the people who thought like him, and now look, there they are in the middle of the party. They're not Conservatives. They're going to screw up this Rwanda plan, which we might as well stop even thinking about it. It ain't going to happen. So they have nobody to blame but themselves. And to go back to the man of the moment, he would be an idiot to jump into bed with the Tories. Nothing in it for him.
Right. Christine, are you going to tune in tonight because he's back on the screen tonight?
Absolutely. And just before I go, can I just one more time put my hat on? It's a bit shrunk and a bit dusty because it's been in the attic, but 20 years ago it was doing sterling work in the
lovely. And you still look fabulous in it, Christine.
Oh, you're too kind. You can come again.
That's Christine Hamilton, who, of course, was third place in the very first I'm a Celebrity I got you out of here 20 years ago. Hard to believe, isn't it?
I know, it's unbelievable. And you mentioned Carol Thatcher as well, who I'd forgotten about.
Yeah.
She won it.
She went in the jungle in 2005 and nobody thought she had a hope. Carol was never political. She was the daughter of Margaret Thatcher, but she was never political. And she came across very, very well. Very nice woman.
And lives a very private life now.
She does, yeah. You hear very little about Carol now.
Well, still to come, somebody who we hear a lot about, Andrew's favourite person, Gary Lineker. The BBC presenter has ignited an impartiality row. Again, after signing an open letter criticising the government's Rwanda plan. We'll be talking about that and much more after your morning news with Tamsin.
Pip, thank you. Here are the headlines at 11:30. The Prime Minister has apologised to victims of the pandemic as he gives evidence at the COVID inquiry. He's facing questions including whether his Eat Out to Help Out scheme helped spread the COVID-19 virus. Mr Sunak's apology comes after previous evidence showed top scientists had referred to him as Dr. Death during the pandemic.
How deeply sorry I am to all of those who lost loved ones, family members through the pandemic, and also all those who suffered in the various different ways throughout the pandemic and as a result of the actions were taken. I've thought a lot about this over the past couple of years. It's important that we learn the lessons so that we can be better prepared in the future, and it is in that spirit and with enormous respect for all of those who were affected that I'm here today.
GB News understands 5 groups of Tory backbenchers will give their verdict on the government's plan to send migrants to Rwanda at around lunchtime today. That's as the bill heads for a crunch vote tomorrow in what's set to be an important week for the Prime Minister. Almost half of parents and teachers think the regulation of schools should be more transparent and less high stakes, according to a new report. Policy consultancy Public First found respondents were also in favour of longer and more frequent inspections. It comes after a coroner found that an Ofsted inspection likely contributed to the death of head teacher Ruth Perry. Now, if you're dreaming of a white Christmas, you may have to settle for a wet one. More than 40 flood warnings are in place across England, with heavy rain and high winds expected. Yellow warnings for rain have also been issued for eastern Scotland from tomorrow morning until the early hours of Wednesday. It follows a weekend of washouts, with two named storms, Elin and Fergus, sweeping across the country. Those are the top stories. You can, of course, get more on all of them. Just visit our website, gbnews.com.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2576 and €1.1677. The price of gold is £1,585 and 92 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,504 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Stay with us here on Britain's Newsroom. We're going to be talking about the Conservative Party's Deputy Chair for Women, who's been caught up in a transphobia row.
Another one.
All the details coming up very soon. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And it's 11:37. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Pip Thompson, who's in for Bev Turner.
The Conservative Party's Deputy Chair for Women has been accused of making transphobic remarks about one of her election rivals.
So what she did, Rachel McLean, she shared a post on Twitter that described transgender person, Melissa Poulton, as a man who wears a wig and calls himself a proud lesbian.
This is Bromsgrove's Green Party candidate, Melissa Poulton's response.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it is a transphobic comment. It's dog whistling at the finest, you know. It's gaslighting, it's everything. By attacking a minority group, it's just, yeah, you know, it's a shit.
Well, in response to this, Rachel McLean said everyone in the UK should be free to live their lives and fulfil their potential regardless of their sex, sexual orientation or gender identity, and to have the confidence and the freedom to be themselves.
And then over the weekend on Twitter, she said, as Deputy Chairperson for Women, I'm clear that the law allows me to say what a woman is and the difference between a woman and a trans woman. Both deserve respect and freedom to live their lives, but it is not transphobic to say they are not the same thing. Well said, her.
Yes. Joining us now is human rights campaigner and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Peter Tatchell, good morning to you. Thanks for talking to us this morning. Is Rachel McLean right, then, in what she says here, Peter?
Well, first, let's just begin how this row began, because Melissa Poulton, the Green Party candidate in Bromsgrove, an election rival of Rachel McLean, she supported the 50-50 Parliament campaign, which is seeking to get more women into Parliament. So Melissa was actually trying to support women's rights and get more women MPs, which is a very honourable thing to do. That's how this whole row kicked off. And I'm really disappointed that, having stood up for women's rights, Rachel McLean saw fit to attack Melissa. That's not a good thing, not a good look at all. We need to, as she says, respect everybody regardless of sexual orientation, sex or gender identity.
Peter, how did she attack her?
Well, I think she said a remark that she said, I just quote, that people in her constituency knew that Melissa was a man wearing, wears a wig and calls himself a proud lesbian. I think that's what she said.
But why is that attacking her? Why is that attacking him? He is a man wearing a wig.
Well, it is misgendering. It is not fair, it's not decent, it's not right to go out of your way to, misgender someone and to attack their identity. Of course, Rachel McLean is entitled to her point of view. That's absolutely right. But I think, to respond in that way to an appeal by a trans woman to support women's rights, that's completely wrong. This was a good cause that Melissa Poulton was espousing, and Rachel McLean chose to move the dial away and attack Melissa personally. That's not right.
Was Rachel not saying what a lot of people were thinking, though? I mean, you've just kept calling Melissa she. I mean, we look at that video and they look like a man in a wig.
Well, there is a big distinction to be made between biological sex and gender identity. They are two different things. A trans woman is not the same as other women. They're different. But that difference is perfectly valid and reasonable. So, just because someone has a different gender identity, I don't think it's an excuse to basically mock and make fun of them. Let's focus on the issue that Melissa raised, which is getting more women into Parliament. That's what she raised. That's what she was fighting for. And it's wrong for her to be personally attacked because she took that honourable stand for women's rights.
All right, well, that's Peter Tatchell. Peter, thanks for joining us. That's Peter Tatchell of the Human Rights Campaign. We've got in the studio with us Emma Wolfe again and Matthew Laza. I defend the right of this Tory deputy chairwoman to say this is a man in a wig. Now, Melissa may identify herself as a trans woman, but she's still a bloke.
I think that Rachel's original tweet was a little provocative, and therefore may have been a little bit unwise. It is politics.
Rachel has taken it down, which suggests that she knows it was a bit provocative.
Yes. I think that her follow-up statement, which I think Peter and Rachel would agree, because Peter said a trans woman is a trans woman. It's different to a woman, but Peter actually said that very clearly there. So that's what Rachel said in her statement, and therefore we can all agree it's good to get more women in Parliament, and that presumably basically means bio women or cis women as the jargon has it. We can all rally around that cause. I think the original language was a little bit off colour, but she should have done a little bit better.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I'm not often speechless, but I am a little bit speechless on this one. I think we all defend the right to love who you like and dress how you like, and freedom of sexuality and freedom of gender identity. But I think Pip is absolutely right that a lot of people will be looking at Melissa Poulton and saying, but that's a man in a wig. And I think it's very confusing, and it feels a bit like gaslighting when we're being told that's a woman and we can see that it's a man. And I think perhaps Rachel McLean's original tweet was a little bit on the personal side, but as you say, that's politics.
It's politics.
People attack each other all the time.
Yeah, and what have we got to treat certain people differently as candidates in general elections because of their sensitivities? Why?
It just makes you feel a bit crazy when you're being told that we all have to say this, and the evidence of your eyes is that's a man wearing a wig dressed as a woman. That's a man dressed up as a woman.
Yes.
And that's fine. People have done that for decades.
I think it's fine for the public to make up their minds, because obviously if you're putting yourself up for election, you're putting yourself up for the voters to decide about you. I'm not sure that Rachel would have, criticised somebody's glasses if they were, one of her political opponents, or attacked another kind of personal characteristic. But the electorate can make their own mind.
But is it criticism, what she said? Is it criticism, or was she just making an observation?
Well, it's criticism in the sense that Melissa would not identify as a man in a wig, and therefore it's a kind of personal attack. But it's absolutely for voters to make up their own minds as to who they want to vote for.
I'd like to know what people in Bromsgrove think. If any of you are watching or listening and you live in Bromsgrove, in Worcestershire, get in touch.
I know Bromsgrove very well because I used to work for the Birmingham Mail many, many centuries ago, and I've spent a lot of time working in the Bromsgrove office. It's very nice, very leafy. Sajid Javid is the outgoing MP there, and I suspect people will be bemused by this row in Bromsgrove.
Just the fact it's nice and leafy.
I'm just describing it because it's a suburb. It's a suburb of Birmingham, but it's a leafy suburb, and it's very nice. But I filmed there. Have you been there?
I filmed there, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What do you think that people there will think?
Well, look, I think we'll find out when the election comes, because that's the ultimate test.
Yes, I suspect Melissa won't be the Tory MP, won't be the Green MP for Bromsgrove.
Yes, I think that is a prediction we can safely make. I wouldn't put money on her winning.
No, I'm going to put money on her not winning.
Well, I think Melissa has pivoted, hasn't she? Because she was a Tory.
Right.
She.
Oh,
that's
interesting.
Yeah. How do you go from the Tory party to the Green Party?
That's quite a journey.
That's quite a journey.
That's what I read.
Yes.
That's a leap.
It is a leap.
Yeah.
Shall I move us on? Because we've got to get in before the end of the programme, the big Christmas debate. We were just discussing our Christmas plans and looking at the trees behind us. So a new survey, it's not quite clear who it's from, has said that over 3 million Brits don't have roast potatoes with their turkey.
What?
Guess what?
What?
Chips.
Oh, no. That's the piss.
It is a travesty. It is a travesty of a roast dinner.
I think it's a variety of chips. Within that 3 million, people may make their own, or they might have oven chips.
Oh,
or who knows? Some might have microwave chips. I mean, but they would be, your scorn.
What are we looking at here in this picture?
And then
That's a load of
so this is the other part of this story, which is that and this is a great name, the Almighty Cod Chippy in Hartlepool has introduced deep-fried Brussels sprouts.
Now
to
you're
its
talking.
menu.
Now that is so wrong.
I think it seems to be. I think there are two things we can put together. Presumably it's open on Christmas Day, so you can have your chips and your deep-fried Brussels sprouts.
Matthew, we were going to have a row today, and I'm afraid we're going to have a row about sprouts.
Yes.
I think they are the food of the gods.
Devil's work.
No, they are the food of the gods. Sprouts, I could eat sprouts until the cows come home. Don't worry, I won't. Don't worry, that would be offensive to everybody.
It would.
But Matthew thinks that sprouts are the devil's own work.
They are literally the devil's work.
I had sprouts at a very lovely lunch I was at yesterday, and they'd been cooked in something called an air fryer.
Yes.
Now, I don't...
I love that something
I don't have one, but I know people do.
They
rave about them.
They were so tasty.
They are wonderful. Sprouts are wonderful.
Have now put the air fryer and cooking instructions on the back of all their food as an aficionado. Other supermarkets...
Well, I bought my sister an air fryer for Christmas last year, and she said it's transformed her life.
Yeah, I have friends who say
what
it's
it is.
transformed that. I don't know.
No.
Do you just throw everything in and it does it?
I haven't got room for one. It's a bit like those George Foreman grills and
I have one of those.
they kind of get.
I had a George Foreman grill. I haven't got
You haven't got any more, have you?
No, I haven't. Are you a cook, Matthew?
I'm not. Hence my reliance on a certain supermarket just mentioned.
Right.
You'll be going to this chippy on Christmas Day.
I will. Luckily on Christmas Day I'm being cooked for, so I'm going to friends on Christmas. But Emma and I are likely to be here on Christmas morning on GB News. So join us.
We are. Join us on Christmas Day morning here with some of the other wonderful.
Well, that's very nice. Now, we want to talk to you about Gary Lineker.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
You're going to defend him, aren't you?
Well, look, actually, I'm not, Andrew. I'm going to support you here because, look, I was at the BBC for a very long time.
Yes.
And I had to abide by the rules. You know, I'm a Labour man. I was involved with Labour's youth section before I joined the BBC. I worked alongside political people like Robbie Gibb, who is now on the board of the BBC, but was Director of Comms for Theresa May, etc.
Yeah.
We all worked in political programmes together, but we left our politics at the front door. In fact, I used to get shouted at by Labour spin doctors for being too hard on the Labour Party. So if the rules applied to me and others, they should apply to Gary. And my big worry is this isn't going to stop with Gary's spoken out, or he signed a letter about the Rwanda policy, condemning it alongside other celebrities. Most of those celebrities are actors. That's fine. They pop up on the BBC, but they're actors.
Yeah.
He's a presenter. He shouldn't be signing it. And my worry is for people on the left who back him, wait for a Labour government, because every lefty cause, which is to the left of the Labour Party during a Labour government, he'll be on there.
Of course he will. But Pip's point is that he's a freelance, so it's different.
Does that make
but I don't think it makes...
No, because the rules now doesn't matter about your contract status, it's whether you present, and you're meant to have a cordon sanitaire between your presenting and commenting. So if you do a 6-part series, you can't comment either side of that. But, you know, in a year's time you can. So, but he presents...
So he's sticking the proverbial up to the BBC.
Of course he is. In either the BBC start to enforce their rules.
Totally.
Tim Davie is looking completely spineless.
That's the Director General,
Either they enforce their rules on BBC presenters or they don't.
Totally.
They've hauled him off air in March when he made the comments about 1930s Germany. He seems to, as you said,
then he went back on.
Out,
because the football commentators went on strike.
He doesn't even apologise, and then he goes back and does exactly the same thing again. And
on the same issue, immigration, Rwanda this time.
It seems that because he is one of their flagship presenters, he does get that different treatment.
Absolutely. Unlike Carol Vorderman, who got booted off of Radio Wales. Who knew she had a show there? Obviously, everybody was devastated. They were probably devastated to lose, obviously.
But look, if the rules have got to apply to everybody, nobody's bigger than the BBC. Hopefully, though, we're seeing the appointment of Samir Shah as the new chairman of the BBC. Experienced programme maker. He used to work on the very programme that I was mentioning, which used to recruit people from politics. And I think he might have a quiet word with the Director General. So I was Mr Lineker. I would be a bit more careful.
I don't think it should be a quiet word with the Director General. I think it should be a very loud one.
Well, then I think the chairman have a quiet word with the Director General, and the Director General then have a loud word with Gary Lineker.
Does it make any difference, Emma, the fact that it's not like he's discussing it on his... What's it called?
Match of the Day. That's quite weird.
Does that make a difference?
No, it doesn't. I mean, Match of the Day is one of their flagship programmes. We all know that Gary Lineker has a huge platform, hugely popular, is paid a massive salary.
1.6 million.
1.6 million. He absolutely needs to stick to the rules. And the fact is, he's actually united a lot of us who agree that it's a chaotic system. I wouldn't agree that it's uncaring, and I would agree that it's costly. But we all agree with him on aspects of what he's saying. But no,
including a lot of Tory MPs, but it doesn't mean he's, as you say it, Emma, it doesn't mean he's got the right to say it.
But he walks on water, doesn't he? Because of the ratings.
He does, and he shouldn't do. And we need the BBC. The rules are there. The rules need to apply to everybody. Because otherwise, it's not fair to people. You know, to a sort of 23-year-old researcher who sends a tweet and gets punished. With a guy being paid 1.6 million.
Or the BBC telling their staff not to go on anti-Semitism marches. Well, hang on a minute.
Or on pride marches. You know, it's the same thing. You know, the rules is rules. Nobody's above them.
Do you do football?
No.
I'd say, does anyone do football here?
I think
is he a good football commentator?
I really don't know. I wouldn't listen to Gary Lineker if you made me.
No.
Paid me.
No.
We're not his target
audience. I think he's a good commentator.
Right.
And I know...
Well, he should be for 1.6 million.
Is he worth 1.6?
His stuff.
Million?
He can't be worth 1.6 million.
Is anyone?
It rates very well.
But doesn't it rate because of the... I mean, the thing is, it rates because people go there to watch the matches.
They're not tuning in to watch him.
We remember when he did get kicked off briefly, the ratings went up.
They did.
Yes, but that was a little bit of a sort of a cameo.
Maybe. But I think they could find somebody cheaper and less controversial.
Yeah, well, there we are. We've got time for one more story.
We have got time for one more story. Emma, about Dame Diana Rigg, the late Dame Diana Rigg.
Yeah, star of Avengers and Game of Thrones, but also many, many, many other more illustrious programs.
Very serious stage actress.
Very serious stage, exactly. She died in 2020, aged 82, and her daughter has released a video of her taped moments of her final sort of few months, talking about the indignity. She was dying from lung cancer, very, very debilitating and painful form of lung cancer. She talks really openly about losing control of her bowels. She talks about the process of dying, the ignominy, the lack of dignity. She really makes us think about... She's asking for the right to assisted dying. She's saying no human being should have to go through this. She says, I have cancer and it is everywhere. I have been given 6 months to live. She says human beings, need true agency over their bodies. It's easy to dismiss all that, but actually we'll all be, we could get any of these conditions at any time, but we'll all be in our 80s soon enough. And why should human beings die like... in pain, but die like animals? Or, she really is just...
Well, animals, we often put them to sleep, to put them out of their suffering.
Yeah, and we can't even do that for our loved ones.
I think this is such a brave move, because Rachel Sterling, who's her daughter, who's a very fine actress herself, I saw on stage a few months ago, it's really brave that they've released the video, brave of Dame Diana to have recorded it, and hopefully it'll reignite the debate, because I think it's absolutely a debate we need to have as a society.
Particularly as we're getting older and older in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was with my mum when, she had cancer, and it's totally something that every family's faced, and we're all going to face.
And it's very easy to have an opinion, but unless you've been through it...
Yeah. We keep pushing death away because we're terrified of it, and it's just one of those parts of life. We push away, but you go through it with one of your parents, and you are changed forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you to you both.
Thank you so much.
Really appreciate
Lovely to see you both.
And that is it from Britain's Newsroom, and thank you for your company today.
Yeah. Up next, Good Afternoon Britain with Tom and Emily. We'll see you tomorrow. See you then.
Bye. Yes, coming up, Rishi Sunak is, of course, at the COVID inquiry. We'll bring you the biggest lines from that. But perhaps more interestingly, behind closed doors, Conservative MPs are plotting.
Yes, groups representing 100 Conservative MPs are meeting, in about 5 minutes' time in Parliament to decide how they're going to act on tomorrow's crucial Rwanda legislation. We will get their verdict this hour and bring it to you live.
This could decide the Prime Minister's fate.
But more than that, there are other issues at play too. What else is going on with Nigel Farage? Could he make a triumphant return to politics? We'll be digging into the details of that too.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alex Deakin. This is your latest weather update from the Met Office for GB News. Most places having a dry, fine day today, and the winds a lot lighter than they were yesterday, or indeed last night. The gusty winds over the past 24 hours caused by the storm system, Storm Fergus, that's heading away. There is another low pressure going to bring us more wet weather tomorrow. But as I say, for most, it's a fine day. For most, there are some showers over eastern Scotland, parts of northwest England. Seen some showers this morning. Staying quite cloudy here and across parts of northeast England down towards East Anglia. 1 or 2 possible showers. But for many, it's dry and bright. Some sunshine in the south, seeing temperatures into double figures. It's quite a cool day further north, 6 or 7, particularly with the breeze still coming in off the North Sea. Where it stays cloudy in northeastern areas with a few showers, it will feel pretty chilly. And then the next area of low pressure comes in tonight. Now, this rain could be quite heavy and persistent over eastern parts of Northern Ireland, so that could cause some disruption. This band of rain then swings across most of England and Wales into southern Scotland by morning time. A mild night in the south. We could see temperatures temporarily get down close to freezing across parts of Scotland. Tomorrow, that rain will push into the central belt of Scotland, then linger across parts of the east of Scotland, northeast England. Met Office yellow warning in place here. Lots of heavy showers come in then further south. Some thunderstorms likely for a time in the south in particular. And blustery once more. Quite mild in the south. Another chilly day further north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show. Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour with me, John Cleese. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here